business on display. Yeah, 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 yeah. We gon' put your business on display. I got winners on the way. You know you can't knock the hustle. And if you gotta get in place, then we gon' put your business on display. Grab a seat, we need you for a minute. And if you got the goods, we can talk about your business. She know what it's like to make a move independently. And I don't fake it's like that. We've been trusting God like that. Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, we gon' put your business on display.
Hey everybody, how are you today? I'm going to say happy Saturday, happy June. June is an amazing month that's not recognized all the time. Why? I get this all the time from Wes when he says, fathers are not celebrated like Mother's Day. Well, I decided for the month of June, drum roll, brrr, I'm going to interview men. I'm going to interview dads, fathers, pastors, sons, grandsons, uncles, you name it. Men, we are calling you forth. So if you are watching this today, you need to go ahead and hit share. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, you need to go to Nisha's Network and subscribe. And you can watch me on all platforms today because we're just going to share. Because men are not celebrated as much as we would love them to be. But for the month of June, I am having a takeover. So guess what? My surprise for the month of June is none other than my BFF, West Takeover. It's a June West Takeover. Hi.
Hello, baby.
He is joining me for the month of June for Father's Day, and he is going to be co-hosting with me. So I am super excited about that. If I interrupt you, we have interruption. We have interruption syndrome in our family. Just so you know. No, we do.
We don't.
And we interrupt each other, and we cut people off.
We don't do that.
Yeah, we do it all the time.
Okay.
My whole entire family. Okay. Which tells, are you a good listener? You think I'm a good listener?
Mm-hmm.
Tell the truth, shame the devil. All right. So comment, share. Okay. Enough about that. Well, do you want to introduce our guest today?
No, baby. You do it. It's your show.
Okay. All right.
Don't let me take over everything.
No, take over everything.
Okay.
Anyway, one day I'm not going to show up and he's going to be by himself. But today we are super honored for the month of June to celebrate somebody very special in our life who has been in our life over 23 years now. I think Nia was 3. She's 26 now. We stumbled across, well, I guess I'll bring our guest on, then I'll tell the story because I don't even know if he knows the story. But everybody knows that you need a head. Everybody knows you need a father in your life. And of course, we had biological dads. But during a really tough season in our life, God placed somebody in our life that became a father to us. And that's none other than our pastor, none other than Pastor Jerry McQuay. Hi, Pastor.
Hi, Nisha and Wes. It's great to see you guys today.
Good morning.
So I want to share a little bit of how we stumbled across Christian Life Center, CLC.tv. So if you all are watching, you all can definitely go ahead and look at CLC.tv because that's where our church is in Tinley Park. Anyway, so we were in between churches. We had went through some church hurt, and we stumbled across, Wes was working midnights, and my mom was with me, and I was determined to find a church because we were visiting a church on the northwest side, which was like a holding pattern for us in between, and they became really good friends of ours. Well, anyway, I sat in the parking lot, and I said, well, Mom, I have to see one speck before I get out this car. And Pastor, did you know what I meant by that?
I'm guessing you wanted some people of color.
All right. I was like, I got to see one speck. At least one has to show up here. and I think it was formerly the assistant associate pastor was Pastor Brian. And I saw them get out of their car. And I was like, okay, Mom, we can go in now. So I called Wes. I said, we could go in. And believe it or not, that was the Sunday that you had these Iron Men. I don't know what that was called, but the whole platform was built out of people chopping blocks. And I don't know what it's called. You remember that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that was shortly after we moved into the building.
Okay, so that's when we came over to CLC and we visited a while. And guess what? We invited a ton of people to come and join, and we hadn't joined yet. But I was like, oh, Sean and Doug would be a good fit for this church. Oh, this one would be a good fit. And then trickled on, and our family and family just started trickling on in. Then finally, we were like, this is our church. So that's the story of that. But anyway, Pastor, I want you to introduce yourself, just like people don't know you. Who are
Wow.
you married to, and how many children, and your poppy,
All
and
right.
all of that jazz?
All right. Well, I'm married to Chris, and we'll be celebrating 50 years this December. I,
Woohoo!
I was 4 and she was 2 when we got married. So
Right.
uh, we have 3 adult children. Our oldest is a television producer in New York City, and then our only daughter, she's in the rose between 2 thorns, I usually say, and our only daughter now lives in the Fort Lauderdale area of Florida and just recently got married, and we're excited about that. We're expecting another grandbaby from her.
Yeah.
And then our youngest son, Brent, and his 3 children are here, so I get to see them every week. And I think probably being Poppy is one of my favorite roles now.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Enjoying the grandkids. I didn't I didn't do all the things that I should have done for the kids, so I'm trying to make up for it with the grandkids.
Oh, that's good. Well, we're gonna dive into talking about really being what is the heart of a father and a pastor and a husband. And as I said earlier on, me and Wes were in transition, and I remember life groups were kind of like just about to start when we had came on the scene and to our church. And I think it was just what stood out to us the most was we felt like CLC was a safe place to land for our family because we were in between going church through church hurt, but we saw that there was something for our kids in the midst of
Mhm.
our wounds. So what would you say, in terms of family? Because we know that.
Well,
Oh, you want me to?
before we get that,
Oh,
I
okay.
just want a little history for those who might not know. So you're from Arkansas. How did
I
you
am.
end up in Chicago or Tennessee, all the way from Arkansas, starting a new church? Who does that?
Yeah. Well, I left Arkansas. First of all, I started preaching when I was 15 years old, which is pretty crazy when I look back on it. But the man that was my pastor, and really was more like a father to me even than a pastor, um, he was elected to pastor a church in the Detroit area. And before he had even moved, I think probably the same day that he got elected, he contacted me in Arkansas and said, I'm going to be moving to Detroit to take this church, and I want you to come and be the youth director." And so that's what got me up there. And a crazy story I've shared a lot of times. I don't know if you've heard it, but I drove all the way from Jonesboro to Detroit, and of course, I was I think 19 at the time. Anyway, after dinner, the pastor said, "I've got to go to the church and take care of a few things in the office. Would you like to go and see the building and all?" And I said, "Sure." And so he gave me the nickel tour, and then he was busy in his office with the things that he had come to do,
Mm.
and I was just kind of wandering around. And in their lobby, there was a bulletin board that the hodgepodge of things, like most church bulletin boards, it was outdated, but there was an article and a picture that had been in the local newspaper because they had done a youth revival or something, and it had a picture of several kids, teenagers, including Chris. And while I was standing in the lobby looking at that newspaper article and that picture, something said, "That's the girl you're going to marry."
Wow.
And I never dated while I was preaching, revival or something like that. I always wanted to keep that separate. And so the revival ended on Sunday night, and they had a church-wide prayer meeting on Monday nights. And so I went to that prayer meeting solely because I was hoping that she would be there. I had seen her during the revival, but hadn't had any conversation with her.
Hmm.
And after the prayer meeting was over, she was standing talking with some of the teenagers, and I went over and waited. I wanted to ask her out, and waited and waited and waited because she saw that I was standing there, and it made her nervous. And when she's nervous, she talks to more.
And finally, I broke into the conversation. I said, if you would stop talking long enough, I'd like to ask you out. That was my pickup line.
Wow.
And so she did agree. And I said, don't you need to call your mom or someone, because it's a school night, get permission. And she called, and her mom couldn't believe it when she told her that evangelist wanted to take her out to eat. And so I said, by the way, I don't know the Detroit area. I just got here, and so you're going to have to pick the place, and and let's go somewhere nice. I'd just gotten paid for the revival, so I'm flush. Let's
Big baller.
go somewhere nice. And she said, well, there's a Taco Bell, not far from here. And I said, where I'm from, Taco Bell's not nice. She said, oh no, it's nice. It's nice. And so we drove to Taco Bell, and it was the same Taco Bell I was accustomed to. So that was our first date.
Wow. See, Pastor, I didn't know that you were a stalker. Wow. I guess it worked out though.
First and only. Yeah, it's
There you
lasted.
That's awesome. Wow. So you came. So how did you end up coming to Tinley? How did that? You were in Detroit.
Wow. Yep, I was in Detroit. We were there for probably 5 years as youth directors and associate pastors of that church that she grew up in. And then we pastored about an hour north of there in Mount Morris, Michigan, small congregation of the denomination that I'd grown up in. And when I went there, it was lily white. It was about 40 or 50 people, and I'm not sure there was a single person of color in that whole county, but it was very close to Flint, Michigan. It was a suburb of Flint, and so we prayed that God would help us to break into that. The northern area of Flint was very heavy African American, and our church was Mount Morris was the first suburb we come to north of the city. And actually, by the time we left there, we were there about 5 years. And by the time we left, our congregation was about 25% African American. And so we left there to become missionaries in the Philippines, and thought that would be our life's work, really intended that it would be. But my wife was in the hospital, I think three or four times that first year we were in the Philippines. She weighed 90 pounds when we came home. And so the Foreign Missions Board, after she got out of the hospital in Detroit, the Foreign Missions Board took one look at her, how frail she was. And they said, if we send you guys back now, we're just asking for more difficulty. So why don't you stay here in the States for a while, pastor a church, and let her really regain her health. And so that's how we got to be in Dexter, Missouri, which was a small town, 7,000 people at that time. And we stayed there about 4 or 5 years. Our youngest son was born there, and it was a great place to raise a family. It's, quiet, and you didn't have to lock your doors at night. It was crazy. But I felt like fish out of water the whole time we were there. It's like I want to reach people, and in this small town, there were two churches of our denomination in that town, and several other Pentecostal churches in a town of 7,000 people. So I felt totally unneeded. It's like we'd gone from feeling like we were making an impact on a nation with the Bible college in the Philippines to feeling like we're not even needed. And I got a call on the phone one day from a pastor from Tinley Park who had supported us in the Philippines. He'd been a partner. And he said, the last time you and I talked, you were hoping to get into a city. Is that still true? And I said, oh yeah, I'm looking constantly for an opportunity. And he said, well, I'm going to resign this church. He said, and you've been on my mind. I really feel like you're the person that should follow me. Wow. He was the founding pastor, been here 12 years, and didn't have many converts in 12 years, but you could, basically this congregation were people who had become dissatisfied at another church of the denomination and had moved in and began transferring worship to him. Anyway, he called, and I agreed to come up and look at, but I told him, I said, you're the founding pastor. You don't need to resign, man. If you're discouraged, I'll come preach for you and give you a shot in the arm or something. In fact, the Sunday that we were there to audition, I didn't even preach that morning. I had Chris teach because she had just written a book about emotional healing, and I thought that would encourage him. And we went to lunch after service, and he said, you don't get it. He said, I'm starting a new job at Hawkinson Ford tomorrow. Oh, wow. Selling cars in Midlothian. He said, if you're not interested, I'll find someone else, but I'm resigning from this church. And so that's what got us here. The Lord set us up. It was the third Sunday of January, and it was 60 degrees that day.
Oh yeah.
Oh
He
yeah.
set you up. Sure.
He set me up, and the front page of the Chicago Tribune that morning was predicting the leading growth area for Chicagoland was going to be for the next 10 years. This was 89, so they said by the year 2000, the leading growth area is going to be the south suburbs in general and Tinley Park in particular. So I read that morning, and then 60 degrees. It's like, I think this would be a good place to come.
God is here.
But yeah, but it was a setup, and I've learned Chicago's winters since then. But anyway, that's what brought us to Tinley Park. The church didn't do any better under my leadership than it had done under his, and so after we'd been here not quite a year, we started all over again, changed the name, moved. They were in a little rented, actually a museum. That congregation didn't have their own building, and so we moved to the local high school and did a big telemarketing and direct mail effort to get Christian Life Center started.
Wow.
That's probably a longer answer than you wanted, but that's what got us here.
That was good.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people hadn't heard it before. So I want to go back to what I was trying to really kind of hone in on in terms of the heart of the Father. I know that doing ministry is a big responsibility. And as we talked earlier, you spoke about changing the world, building a church is not worth it if your family is not first. And even though that, you have that journey, you know what I mean? Like you said, Brent, well, I'll let you tell the story. But my point is that I think that that's what drew us, is that we always put each other first, and we were intentional about that. But I think we really drove ourselves in the ground, for ministry. And we needed a change. And that's really what, to me, CLC, I don't know about Wes, but it would really represent it. And I was resistant at first because of just not really wanting to start over. But I knew we had to do something. So tell us a little bit about that journey of how, the motto behind CLC is, reaching people, loving God. And I don't remember, there's been different missions throughout the years, but your main mission to me has been family. If we don't know anything about Pastor, two things he cares about is missions and children's ministry. We know that for a fact. So tell us a little bit, and missions goes beyond just international, even though we CLCs are all over the world, but give us a little bit about that, your motto in terms of the church and building the church, but putting family first.
Yeah, it was. I think what I said earlier to you is it is probably the biggest regret that I have in ministry is in those early years, particularly Mount Morris and Dexter. I thought my job is to build a church and reach people and grow the church, and so I was teaching home Bible studies sometimes 3 nights a week or 4 nights a week, and then had a midweek service as well and a Sunday night service. So I was never home with the family, when the kids were small. But I thought I was doing the work of the Lord. That's what He wanted from me. And if I could change anything about those early years, it was I would have chosen to spend time with the family, because, as you said a minute ago, if you build that church, that you're trying to build, and you lose your family in the process, you haven't gained anything. God created a family before He created a church, and in fact, a long time before. First and second chapter of Genesis for a family, and the church didn't come along until Acts chapter 2. So, that was a huge mistake and regret that I have, and I constantly mention that to younger pastors today, that make sure you're making time for your family, taking care of your wife and your kids and yourself. Got to be healthy. And one thing that we have tried to do at CLC, I think what you're alluding to, is to create a healthy church. I've said for years, we're certainly not the biggest church in Chicagoland, and not the best church, but we are a healthy church, and we've tried to keep it that way through the years.
Yeah, that definitely makes a difference. One of the things I noticed when we came was the special attention that you gave to families with the children's ministries. I had never been to a church where there was so much emphasis on it. And it made a difference. You can tell from the families, from the kids growing up. Even, as long as we've been there, even watching some of the teens who kind of grew up with our kids, their journey and where they are now, and their respective ministries and worship leaders all over the country. It was all birthed right there. And without a doubt, I believe that they got their foundation from CLC because of the intention um, on families and making sure that families came first, which is awesome.
Yeah, I want to talk about a little bit about CLC because when we first came, I never forget it when I started doing a few people from CLC, the Franklins. I would do Terry Lynn's hair, and she told me this, and I don't know if you even ever heard this, but she said CLC is kind of like a hospital and a college. Okay, so two things: hospital for people who have been wounded to come in. They are, and my analogy is they get what they need, they get healed, they either stick around and become doctors and nurses and to continue to help other people, or they go back to their wherever they God has called them to, right? So it's coming in, which sometimes it felt like, I'm being transparent, CLC is like a revolving door. But then it's also like a college. This is what Terry Lynn said, that this was really early on. We probably hadn't been members even 5 years. That, you come in, you get your syllabus, and you complete the work. Nobody's like holding your hand. And you have to be intentional about your own personal journey with the Lord. And that was profound for me because sometimes people become dependent on wanting every person, even though our pastor, let me tell you, probably not so much anymore. We so big. But remembering our names the first time we came after service was like, who is this man that remembered our name from a week ago? It's like, and then my friends that we would bring along the way, they'd be like, he remembered my name. So that intentionality, but I'm saying that to say that, even as the college course, it's like those are some of the love drew us, but also the fact that we had to dive in for ourselves. And so, but I want you to speak to the hospital part. Do you feel like CLC has been a hospital for many throughout the years? And speak to that revolving door with leaders and pastors that come sit in the audience, worship leaders, and then they go to their local assembly.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I think it was actually a prophetic word in the very early years, maybe the first year or two that we were in Tinley Park, that God was going to send us a lot of people that were hurting, wounded Christians, and most often hurt and wounded at their church, and uh, and so that has been a definite focus. Uh, it it feels good to be able to help people and see them get healing, like that, and come to health. It feels bad to see them leave again. And I constantly have to remind myself that this is what we're here for. We're here to train and equip people. And if God has an intention to, send them elsewhere or to send them back where they came from, I can't feel bad about that. I have to rejoice in it. And it's even, it's just been that way consistently, from the beginning. The name thing, I've got to mention this because early on, probably Mount Morris or Dexter, maybe at the most, um, I just realized that a person's name is important to them, and just the fact that you would remember their name seems to make a real positive impression. So I worked at it. It was not. I don't have a photographic memory. I worked at being able to remember people's names, and all the way up until, I don't know, we were probably over 1,000 in attendance. I really could name just everybody, not only in the congregation but first time guests when they'd return. But my reputation it has ruined that because now I've more than once somebody from the church will introduce me to a first time guest they brought, and then they'll say, "Now you watch. If you come back next week, he'll know your name. He'll know who you are." And the truth is, as I've gotten older, every time I learn a new name, it seems to kick out one of the old ones. My hard drive is full, and so it's an undeserved reputation now because I couldn't tell you how many times now even people who are members of the church and been attending for 10 or 15 years, and we'll be in the altar, and I'm going to pray for them, and I say, "I'm sorry, but remind remind me of your name," because it seems like they're gone now. But that was good for a while. It worked for those early years anyway.
Yeah, it did the trick. And I was glad that you mentioned that pastors, they have feelings, and they miss people, and their
Sure.
feelings get hurt a little bit when people leave, and sometimes they don't leave with an explanation. Sometimes they give one.
Yeah.
I don't know if that ever really helps the matters anymore.
Right.
But and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think people look at pastors as just sitting up there and teaching, and that's all that you do, and you don't have family and friends and feelings and all the things that go along with that.
Yeah.
And that's important to know.
Yeah, for me, I think that's probably been the most difficult part of ministry is seeing people that you love and people that you've cared for and ministered to leave, and sometimes they don't leave under any what I would consider a good reason. It's not that God's really calling them somewhere else. They just decide to go, and it does hurt. I used to think when we were a smaller congregation, I used to think that, if we grow larger, it won't hurt so bad, because we got more people, and so we won't be worried. But I'm finding if you build relationships with people, which I seek to do, if you're not just a figurehead, but you're really spending time with the sheep, it hurts no matter what size you are. At least up to any size that we've ever been at CLC, at least it still hurts. And I do try to warn younger pastors about that. That you're human. It's going to be painful. So
Yeah.
yeah, you have to adjust to it.
But one of the things that we always said, and you have never officially called yourself an apostle, but we always say that there is definitely an apostolic anointing on you with the planting and the starting of churches, and sending people off for their missions.
Mhm.
I know that it's always not gone to plan like you wanted,
Right.
but it was God's plan. God's plan
True.
always prevails. And there are many churches in the Chicagoland area that were birthed right out of CLC, not even mentioning all the other churches overseas. How many CLCs?
In the Philippines, I don't even know. The last time I asked them, there were 23, but it seems like they're starting more new ones, and all of that has been such a joy in one sense. But we've had, and this is not false humility. We've just had very little to do with it. My connection, has been with one pastor there, Hurley Montez, and he is an apostolic leader, and people are drawn to him. And so sometimes it's because they're starting churches, sometimes it's because they were an independent church and they're looking for a pastor, a father figure, and they gravitate to him. And he says, when they come to him, he said, "You have to be a part of CLC." We're all CLC. So in fact, we'll be going back in September. I think you guys were at one of the Philippine conferences that we do. It's just so much fun. They bring all of their churches together, and we'll be doing that again this September after not being there in the last 2 or 2.5 years because of COVID. So I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to just speak a minute just for fathers because thinking about this, it's been, I mean, of course, Father's Day is not as heightened as Mother's Day, but I
Mhm.
was thinking about, you just being a dad and a father who is our mission for Heart Life. And I want to say this too. My mom founded Heart Life Ministries, which probably you didn't notice, but it was called Heart to Heart, like in the year of
Oh
1999.
wow.
But then because of the different interactions, she moved it in 2009 to Heart Life Ministries. And the reason we went under the umbrella of that, because it was started as a women's ministry, was because we were in between churches. And
Mm.
my mother's like, you got to find a church. She's not going to, well, that's one thing she's not, I don't care if we have an outreach, you got to find a church. But I will say that we have learned so much from CLC and from you, Pastor, and just how you run a ministry, even looking at it from a business standpoint. We've made
Mhm.
many mistakes throughout the years, but we really have always led people back to CLC because we realize that the growth and the things that we've learned and how we operate, even the marriage getaways and the ministry, is because of our own home church. So we say kudos and thank you to what
Thank
you have
you.
taught us throughout the years. But I wanted to say that so every year Wes picks a theme, God gives him a theme, and this year's theme is legacy. So we're kind of hone on in and bring it on home with this. It's important for us to walk our children to walk in the fear and admonition of the Lord and to be
Mhm.
successors and to have a legacy that says, you're living for God and your children are operating just like your spiritual children are going out. Your name is all over the spiritual children around the world, right? You
Mhm.
want that. You don't want to keep
Sure.
them at home. You want them to go out and into all the world. But with that being said, pastors will probably never retire in some way. They're just probably repositioned. But how do you feel in terms of, repositioning yourself to allow legacy to come forth as a father,
Great.
as a pastor, you know?
Yeah, great question. It has, boy, it has humbled me, I guess, to see Brent's development through the years, and his. I've had this happen on many occasions. The Dino message a couple weeks ago was probably the latest, and I sit there listening to him, and I think, where did he get all of this? He didn't. He didn't get this from me, you know. So it is it's a real joy, and I have some of those same feelings about Jen in a different role. You know, she's no longer a missions pastor, but she's continuing in ministry in Florida, and that brings me a real sense of fulfillment as well. But yeah, you want to see your children do well, and especially to see them flourish in the work of God.
Amen. Amen. And flourish, period. Because I mean, you got a big wig for an older son out there in Hollywood, okay? Chad's
Yes,
doing his thing, right?
he is making more money than I ever dreamed possible. But
Look, celebrity
yeah,
sons,
yeah,
so that's what legacy is about, and just teaching from the business standpoint, from the ministry standpoint, and then also just naturally and spiritually wanting to see your value come forth. What would you say to fathers today, if you could say anything?
boy, I would say don't neglect your family, because it's not just me. Mine was trying to build a church, which makes me feel better about it, because for the work of God. But the truth is, most men, if they do struggle at all in regards to their family, it's that same thing. It's on their career that they are so focused and they're trying to get to the next place, get the next promotion, whatever, and they're so focused on their career that they neglect the children and sometimes even their spouse. And so I would just urge men not to do that, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely makes a difference. I think one of my favorite scriptures. I can't remember where it's from. I know I'm going to misquote it, but
That's for me in my house.
no, the it talks about to gain the whole world and to lose your own soul.
Yeah.
Um,
What
and
does it profit a man if he gains the whole world? Yeah.
Yeah, and I always kind of attain that to your soul as being your family.
Mhm.
What good does it do to go out there and work your brains out and make all this money, and in the name of I'm doing it for my family, I'm doing it for my family, and then
Yeah.
while you're working, you turn around and now they're all grown, gone off to college. It's like, well, did you really do it for your family? Because they're
Yeah.
gone now. They've
Yeah.
missed all of that.
Right.
You're sure they've been provided for, but they missed a whole lot of things they probably, if they never had, they probably would have never missed,
Yeah.
cared about.
So true. One of the men that has mentored me through his writings and his ministry is John Maxwell, and I think he was the first one that I heard say it. That um, he said that success to him was for the people who were closest to him, his family, would respect him the most, and that's boy, that's a high bar, high standard to live by. But I feel the same way.
Yeah. Well, it's been so great talking to you today. Thank you so much. And I
Been,
know it's early, but happy Father's Day. And
thank you.
I've been having people close out in prayer, especially if they're in ministry. So I just like for you as our spiritual father, and to really pray for the fathers in this season. That so much is going on in the world, but just to really pray for the fathers in general.
All right. Well, Lord, I thank you for the opportunity to share today with Wes and Nisha and everyone that would be receiving this. But I pray specifically for the fathers. Uh, such an important role, and so many of us fathers were not prepared for it when we went into marriage and when we began to have children. But I pray, Lord, that you would speak to the heart of every dad who's watching this, that they would recognize that those children are their number one priority after you, that they put their family first. And so, Lord, I pray that you would give them wisdom and direction, and I pray that you would enable the dads who are watching this to see their legacy fulfilled, to see their children flourish and prosper, and that you would do a great work in every life. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank-
Thank you. This was fun. I
Yeah,
didn't know what to expect, but it was fun.
I'm so glad I crashed it. I told Nisha when she said you were going to be on, I said, "Oh, I'm coming." You made me
Good
put on a
deal.
real shirt this morning.
Good
Thank
deal.
you, Pastor. Until
Thank you. Love you guys.
guys, go to clc.tv. Join us on Sundays. It's
Yeah.
Pentecost. We're doing Pentecost all month, right?
We've got a great guest speaker on Father's Day that I know everyone would enjoy.
So come hang out with us on Father's Day. All right. Have a
All
great
right.
day, everybody. Thanks, Pastor.
Thank you.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, we gon' put your business on display.